to new OS. So
You don't think restarting will fix it? You think-
no, it did this last time too, but last time I tried to restart, so I have to do some research and see why I can't use my computer anymore.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay. So the spinner thing, is it okay if I change some stuff? I like it. I just want to change a couple
Yeah, no, I just wanted to
things.
get a spinner and I don't mind.
And I need to test it, which I can't do because Chrome isn't working right now. But great change. Excited. Mostly to the text, just to clarify, because it says loading and neither of them are loading anything. So, but I think that's a very small, it's cosmetic. So, and I may or may not be able to do the uploading bug today.
Oh,
That's
great.
why.
Yeah.
It may have to wait till tomorrow or something like that. I have it mostly done. I just have to make sure local tests pass, and then I have to figure out how to release and test without messing up the instructions for what to install. Because really I want them to install the latest release, but there's currently no way for me to, it's alphabetically ordered backwards because I couldn't get NPM to give me what I needed.
Are you saying the alphabetical ordering is different from the latest or ordering?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll figure out a way to make it alphabetically not the top of the list. That's all.
Okay. Yeah. From my point of view, I don't know that I might do a little changes in the Weaver this week, but not a lot. I can use manual testing, which is what I've been doing. So don't feel like you have to rush that.
Okay.
It always goes in cycles for me. I'll try it for a while, and then if I run into a blocker, it might be a while before I try it again, which is totally fine.
Yeah,
for me.
that's the way it goes.
So don't feel like just because I found that issue recently that you have to drop everything to fix it.
Sure. I mean, I prefer, I mean, a lot of times I will prioritize bugs. There are times when.
Yeah, it makes sense if you're
on
like
the shelf.
in the morass of what do I do today, than to choose prioritize things that are like someone actually will use this.
Yeah. Okay.
I should have asked David about something else. I'm just remembering now. I better write back.
Okay, just so you know, you're sharing your screen still.
Yeah, I won't do that right now. Don't worry.
Okay.
It just reminds me. Let me see. I don't think we have any outstanding PRs. Bryce came up with that handy search that I forget. Open Kiln PR.
Yeah, there are a bunch of open kiln things that actually need some work and need that bug fix. One from a volunteer that is having limited time to check back on it. One from Bryce that needs to be broken up and get a few fixes before it can be pulled in. One that is potentially solved by something upstream that still needs an extra test added to make sure. And then there's one that hasn't been reviewed because no one's around to review it. So yeah.
All right. I don't think anything else is looking there.
Sure.
Yeah, and let's just see. Was it organization or just org? I think actually.
Probably org. I wonder if either one will work actually.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it would. Didn't I already rename that issue? What does it have? Oh, they opened two. That's all. I'm going to close this one.
If you mark at, oh, I see there, but you have a tag already for it, label.
Okay, so I'm not sure.
I've
I
wondered
have
if
enough
there,
context to work on this now, but
if there should be a way for people to share their username or whatever if they want to, or their name in case, well, but issues aren't really the place to contact people.
yeah, I think we have some ideas to refactor that to make it better, but I don't know that it's high enough on the priority list for anything to happen with it very soon.
Yeah, maybe just on a test server or a dev server was my thought, so that people giving feedback like SMEs and stuff like that could identify who they are. That was my,
Yeah, when you're on the test server, actually, it does let you say who you are.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll show you an example.
because I saw something on Alaska courts that
I'm not doing it on this one. Let's see.
maybe it's just not updated. That's okay.
You might have
I trust you.
customized.
I trust
wanna
you.
make sure.
Okay.
No. Well, this is
Or
the
the
test one.
instructions, you know
I
what
thought it
though?
did. Maybe we
It
changed
says
it.
email. What's your email?
Oh, there we go. Well, this is only if you say that you want to be part of the user feedback panel.
I see. Well, people also have the choice to put their name in the description, so people
Which
can just
happens
do
all the
that
time when people
instruction.
really shouldn't, actually.
Yes, it does. And it can happen if people really should, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Just looking through the issues, see if anything that came up in the last week is urgent.
yeah,
This
I've
is
been
something I
super
guess we should
unproductive, I
do.
will say. Has persistent statistics. Oh, got it.
Okay, yeah, just the two different things. Like one is we've been talking about ways to make sure interviews we can see if interviews have been used. And with Google Analytics 4 turning, GA3 is turning off, and we don't have GA4 turned on yet. But I know there's some differences in how it counts. And Matt's been talking about some of those on our Monday calls.
Yeah, Matt had a whole thing with them, I remember.
I kind of think we need to have a different way to track all of our interview usage. So I'm thinking one of those ways is to make sure the interviews that record, if they've been used, all the recording in a way that's persistent. Because I think until recently, the Weaver didn't make sure that it was persistent if it did record. And then the other thing is we should make sure GA4. I want like two backups basically to make sure we're actually monitoring usage.
It's a bit, if what Google Analytics is for is monitoring usage, and we're not even using it to monitor usage, it just seems.
We are using it to monitor usage. I have give pretty regular reports on what interviews are being used and which ones aren't. And it has a built-in way to check to see if you've reached the download screen, right? Because it's checking on each screen. We can use it to look for drop-off. We're using it in a pretty basic way, but it does the job. It's independent of bugs we can introduce, which is helpful.
Sure.
I don't want our only source of monitoring to be tools that we've built.
Fair enough.
And that are fragile to issues with our production deployment.
Fair enough.
I mean, obviously, would it be better if it was a non-Google thing? Yeah, probably.
Mm,
But I think it's the right choice for our team size.
mm.
Unless it's really hard to switch to GA4, in which case maybe we take that time to come up with another system that's
Well,
better
what I'm
suited
saying
to
is
things.
if we're writing our own system, then like, why, like, yeah,
Different things. They do
tracking,
different things. So
okay,
analytics can be used to see what people interact with on the screen. I don't GA4 maybe have better options from what I can tell. Like GA3 like didn't have really great granularity to let you do things like
I see.
if someone's going through the eviction interview, like where do they live, what's their address, which we're not tracking that kind of stuff, but like the zip code information we track by default, that's not like a Google Analytics feature, but it's more granular than exists there, but we
Okay,
can track it with our statistics.
okay,
It makes sense. Statistics are more like the kind of things we would put in a grant report to talk about the biggest problems people are experiencing who use our interview, and not in terms of how to use the interview, but their substantive problems. I mean, and
mhm,
where do they live? Which representative do they have? So you can explain to that representative in a lobbying effort, hey, people in your district are having problems with code enforcement on this kind of issue. Here's some problem landlords. We're not getting that from Google Analytics, but for Google Analytics is an independent source to track where do people have problems using our interview, which interviews get used, how much, how many people reach the download screen. And if we do want to try to track drop off without writing a really complicated way to see which screens they stop on ourselves, we can use it for that too.
mhm.
So yeah, they're similar overlapping problems, but they're different.
Okay. Okay, cool. There's documentation for ALKILM. Oh, there was something I wanted to add to the documentation unrelated to that, but
I was
should
trying to,
be an
yeah,
application, copy and paste, not just point to the setup interview.
so I can explain that if you want. So when I was looking to
Mhm.
set up tests on Made, so
Mhm.
we had added tests a long time ago. They weren't the right version of the tests. So I was like, I'm going to redo it. But I didn't delete the existing workflow file.
Mhm.
So I tried using the setup interview and it didn't work. It didn't really tell me why, but I figured, oh, it's because maybe it's because that file's already there. But my next solution, which would work great for me, would have been to copy and paste the file, which as far as I can tell, it's just like it always has the same contents, right? Or does it have different?
It does change over time depending on stuff. Like, it doesn't change very often though.
But it doesn't
Um,
change based on answers from the setup interview itself.
um, that was a feature we were planning to add, but we could say, here's a basic version.
I was thinking it
Like
might be
if,
helpful to put that in the documentation.
sure.
Say, this is if you want to copy yourself, here's what you do.
Yeah, it used to be much more complicated, so that wasn't even an option, but it should be
Got it.
doable now. Um,
Just want to confirm my
Setup
understanding.
interview, if you asked to set up testing for your repository, then it would have offered you a new files for your repository. Like it would have made a pull request that would include new files. You'd have to set the secrets again and stuff because we worried that if we got that granular down to that level of detail, folks would not, especially new folks would find it too confusing. But maybe a good substitute is just to offer a page with just that information that you can just copy and paste files. Sure.
It does occur to me as we're going through this, it could be in the setup interview too.
It
Where
could be
it just
what?
says, in the setup interview could say, we're going to copy this file to this location. Here's what it will say. And then
Sure.
if it doesn't work, you can manually copy paste it, or maybe only if it fails to take that
Sure.
step. I don't know.
Sure.
Or maybe it's better to not put it there because it could be too confusing for people who are.
Well, I was thinking of putting it on the advanced page of the
Documentation.
ALKILM documentation. so that it would be, we could have a help screen for the end of the interview to say if it didn't work, these are the files, or we could have a help screen near the beginning to say if you just want to copy the files, here are the current files. Those are some options. If you can note those down with maybe what you'd prefer.
I think both could be good. I think that my first thing to do if the setup interview didn't work was going to be to go back to the documentation. So,
Yeah.
and it is a more advanced thing. Documentation is a great place for advanced content. If you think it would overwhelm people in the setup interview, I would have solved my problem to see it there. What I did as my third fallback was to just visit an interview that I knew had it working. I looked at it and was like, oh, this actually doesn't look like it's customized. It'll be really easy for me to just put it in.
Yeah. Yep.
I was expecting to maybe have to customize some of it. And it was nice I didn't have to.
Yeah. I do like people giving people just in-time information, and there may be a way to slip it in that goes you just want the files. But I'll see. Might ask Caroline. She uses it a lot. Well, which might not make her the best audience, but usually she has good insights about like what, even she can keep in perspective a new user.
Maybe it's good to link to an interview that uses it too, just so people can have a comparison point. The nice thing is that's naturally self-enforced to be up to date. If it's an interview that we wrote, that is constantly maintained.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have ideas of where to do that we keep fairly up to date and don't modify that much. That would be.
I was thinking you could just say like, hey, here are 3 interviews that use it. Real interviews, not like a mock-up
demo.
interview.
Yeah, I don't want to maintain another repository for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
just an idea. It doesn't necessarily mean it may not be the right idea, but let's see.
Yeah.
I'll list some ideas here.
Okay, yeah.
Let's do assembly line. Weaver. And then one more interview. I think when I was working on the MAID tests, I didn't know if this is a way more specific question, not the general one we were starting with, but
okay, yeah.
Hold on. I'm trying to think of what would be another good example. And I was thinking maybe MAID because it has multiple languages, but actually I have no idea if I've set it up to work where it tests the multiple languages. Probably I haven't.
I think not, because that has fallen by the wayside from disuse. Like, people just haven't been testing multiple languages, and you hadn't brought it up as a concern recently. So it is going to need some updating to our most recent versions if we're gonna reinstate it. That's kind of the deal with that right now. I think you're using version 4.
I just upgraded it because it wasn't running before.
So I thought you were using version 3. That's what I had. But that can be bumped up on the list.
It didn't look like there was anywhere it said what languages to run. So I wasn't sure if it's part of the feature file, if it's automatic. It does say here extra languages. Oh, there's a GitHub secret tied to it too. That maybe is what it was using. Okay, I hadn't looked at that.
Yeah, that was edited out for now. But we can put that on the short list on the, kind of top list of.
It would be nice.
Next.
Part of what happened is this was the first interview that was translated ever. I believe.
Yeah.
DocAssemble's document translation system. And when I started trying to actually run the interview, I noticed a lot of bugs introduced by the translator.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
next time I had that situation, I wrote it was mostly Jinja errors. So I wrote or Mako errors, I guess. I wrote a dashboard interview that checks
Yeah.
for those errors in the Excel file. So instead of having to find them one by one, fix them one at a time
Yeah.
from the automated test report, it just checks the file row by row for syntax issues. And that seems to be just fine to
Seems to be catching things.
head those errors off at better time. But it doesn't hurt to have some automated tests per language because there are
Okay.
differences.
Yeah. I had thought that was kind of a better replacement, but yeah, if the automated tests also could handle that, it might be able to catch edge cases that the other one doesn't catch.
Yeah. So again, like, so my automated one could do, but that checks the Excel file cannot find logic errors. It can only find syntax errors.
Yeah.
And you could get yourself into an infinite loop because of a logic error.
Yeah.
That's introduced by a translator. It's less likely, but some
Okay.
things that the translator does wrong, you only can find through manual tests. Like if they remove formatting code unintentionally, that, in a way that doesn't break it from rendering, which just makes it not do what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
I always budget a few hours to review the translations, but when they're large, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, and it's hard to, well, I guess lawyers are used to those kind of details, but it's just, I find them hard to parse like exactly what's going on where. I find it hard to catch. Okay. So I'll put that on the upper list of things to check for version 4 and version 5.
It might be a good one to list as an example if we do to get the language tags working, because it's a feature that's not used in a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
Or we could do the 209A if there are
Yeah.
tests for that.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
It's the perfect.
Good notes. Good notes.
Okay.
Oh, and I need to update the Node version on these ones. Update Node version for interview. I wish we could just, instead of having all these files in multiple places, I wish I could take the files from the setup interview and just have them generated in the documentation. Because otherwise we have to remember to update both places. But
Yeah, I see what you're saying. We could do that. There's no reason we couldn't. That's what we're basically doing with the output of the Google documentation generator from
can you pick
DocStrings.
and choose files like that?
It wouldn't be the same thing, but I'm saying it does. It's basically, it might be a plugin for Docusaurus that adds specific files from a script. So I'm saying, like, you could script it to do that. I guess that's obvious. You can, it's code, you can script it to do something. Doesn't mean it's easy. I don't actually know the way to do it. I'm just saying it's technically, there is something we're using that does that, where it copies content into the documentation based on an external source. But that was a plugin somebody wrote. Maybe it would be not realistic for us to do it. It's something to consider. I've also been thinking about, like, trying to do something like Jonathan does, where he makes screenshots for some questions as our question library gets bigger. So it actually screenshots them instead of us having to manually update. Because now I'm going to change that question about pronouns and I'll have to recreate the screenshots I added for it.
Yeah. I wonder how he does that, if he uses Beautiful Soup or like Selenium or
I think it's
Jest or like whatever.
I believe it's Selenium.
Mm.
So, but I mean, one thing is, like, we're already doing automated tests, so I guess we could copy that, start up Kiln to do the screenshotting. It's a bit heavy, but he's doing it locally, I think. But we just
Okay.
don't have that option with GitHub Actions, to my knowledge.
No, but it could be
Not yet.
a local compile step. Like we do some stuff locally anyway.
Oh, I
It
just
just has that for adjusting snapshots. Was it just, or was it a different one?
I think Bryce might have some ideas about performance testing. He's done some good things about that before. So I don't have an issue for this, but at least not a new issue. We've talked about this forever. There's some
Yeah.
translations we want to do for an interview a student wrote last year. Would like to be able to make sure for that interview that they don't translate phrases that have already been translated in another project, but we've never had a single place to list all of the translated strings in different languages for assembly line. So one thing we could do is tell people, if you want to translate it, before you do, add this one and include line to your interview. But I'm curious to know if it would be a performance impact to just always load all of the translation files, because that would mean there's no extra step for authors to take when they're ready to start translating. So I need to know if there's a way we can measure the performance impact that it has, if any.
Of just compiling all languages at the same time whenever.
Even for interviews that are
loads.
only in English.
Yeah, I should definitely write that question down. I'll say certainly tests are made n times longer, right? N being the number of languages that are being tested. So
good point, but I'm not saying we translate every interview all the time. I'm just saying that we load the files that allow translation, which it just only would be turned on if someone explicitly added the button to change the language.
If there were extra language tests, would you want them to be automatic and run every single time, or would you want it to be optional?
So I don't expect a lot of Jinja, or it's a lot of conditional logic, Mako logic, I guess, in most of the base translations that we use, right? I guess there could be bugs introduced at that level. Usually it's in more complex screens that have been customized for somebody. So I don't know that we need to add them to our automated tests of the assembly line package itself. But maybe it's not a bad idea. I mean, it's just an extra test we can run. That
I'm more asking for made.
Oh.
Like, would you want the translations to be tested every single time you change code? Or would you want?
I guess it'd be better to trigger it if.
Because it could be added to manual tests as opposed to like manually triggered tests as opposed to on push, right?
That would be fine. Yeah, that would work fine if it was a manual test. I guess it should be something an author should be able to decide depending on their needs. But I think for made, it's a long interview. The tests already take a while. That might make sense. I'm not changing it all the time, though. It's pretty mature. It's just a few times a year there are substantive updates, and I had to update the style recently to match another grant. So I didn't actually change the translations at all yet, and I have to review them to see if they need that.
Okay.
So I won't be here next Monday. So I'm just realizing I shouldn't put things on the agenda to discuss with Bryce that I won't be around for. Unless there's things that you and Bryce want to discuss on your own. But the things I particularly had questions about,
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to talk about next week.
So we could change the date up there to 6.
I did already, yeah. It's
Oh, I
I,
see.
I did it, updated already.
And maybe add a section for next week.
Sure.
Okay.
And then it will be July 4th. And then there'll be 2 weeks where I won't be around for Monday, because Monday is Monday the 4th. Or maybe it's not till Tuesday. July 4th is Tuesday, actually. So we could, I think that might be a holiday though. July 3rd might be July 4th. But
Maybe July 4th weekend. Okay.
it might be a holiday. I don't know.
Okay.
I'll be around and probably working in some capacity, but if the university is closed, Bryce would have the day off, and I guess have the day off too, but
Yeah.
I'll basically think the kids have camp, so
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's no school
one of our children will be in
then. Yeah.
sleepaway camp. Okay, so nothing there really. Anything else? Let's see. Let's look in the last 2 weeks. Michelle, I don't know if you ever are looking. Sounds like you have plenty to do. I'm just thinking, oh, I'm going to also
I
do a
could get
demo of
that
Rate
in.
My PDF maybe. So I should probably look at that for some issues, these CSS issues this week. Yeah, I probably shouldn't do anything substantive, just bug fixes and tweaks. This got merged. We're using the hierarchical multi-select in the Weaver now, which I think is
Okay.
better than what we had before, which was a really long checklist you had to scroll through and was hard to read. But it's not great. So I don't know if you have any ideas. Basically, here's the repository we've been using, and
182.
we had to compile it and then to fix it so it worked with Bootstrap 5.
182.
Sorry,
Which PR is it?
this is an issue
Issues 182.
on the toolbox.
Okay.
So this is a toolbox feature that's been around for a while, the hierarchical multi-select. And it's a feature that we hadn't used anywhere in the assembly line until the most recent version of the Weaver.
Mhm.
I have that
That
installed.
I'd have to do some research, but that may become complex. Top-level topics aren't clickable, only the triangle, and so you can't pick a topic that's more general.
No,
I mean,
that's
one
not an
way-
issue, really. I'll show you the issue.
Okay.
It's a more simple issue than that, but it's more of a what I see as the big issue is more to do with just the user interface than the substantive things you can select.
Yeah.
But there's also a bigger question of like, how do we want to maintain that feature? Right now, what we've done is we compile the interview,
Okay.
this plugin, and then we copy the compiled code. I think it probably, that's not that scalable, right?
Yeah.
If we would need to make changes. And we've made some changes inline in the rendered code rather than in the source code. But this seems to be the best plugin to do the way we currently use it.
So if we find an upstream fix,
Doesn't get updated very often. You can see there's 30 open PRs.
oh, holy moly. Yeah, okay.
So it's like, do we want to become the maintainers for a fork of it? I guess is a question. We want to switch to another plugin which doesn't have as many features. Do you want to build our own code, which is smaller and easier to test? That does just the one thing we need it to do better, because this is huge. It has lots of options that we're not using.
Okay.
But let me actually show you what it does. This is not the newest one. Okay. I'm gonna switch to a playground. And maybe I should add now to see if maybe I can update the Weaver on the installed version. Okay. So
Okay.
this is still long, but
Mm-hmm.
you can see these are the top level topics from the list taxonomy. I should be able to click here. But I have to actually click on
Click
that
on the
little arrow. That's what I don't
Got
want.
it. That's the problem. And also the list is extending the page.
Yeah, that's probably another issue that with the CSS.
Sure.
But the nice thing is it can be searched. So,
Yep.
but then you have to scroll to the topic. So maybe we shouldn't use this. I don't know, but there's other interfaces for this. The thing is we have to search. I've narrowed it down to 200 topics out of 1,000. So it's short. I think people might still want to browse rather than type to find a topic that matches. Oh, this X doesn't work either. I guess I should write that down. Is it a bug?
Yeah. You it's a shame. I wonder. That may indeed be a problem.
So we had to change the Z index of the search button to get that to be visible. This icon wasn't visible first.
Oh, I see.
So I wonder if that overrides this somehow, if it's larger than it looks. But we can type here, so I'm not sure if that is realistically the issue. I just wanted to write down that idea. Yeah, so it seems like it's okay to not be able to check the top level topic to me.
Yeah, I see. But you would like to be able to click on it.
I want to be able to click on the topic to open it, expand and hide it. And maybe it should look different too. Maybe the styling's not quite right.
Yeah.
So this is like, yeah, it's not the best. I wish it were better. The other options that I linked to don't have that grouping at all. So that was one thing I said is maybe we should use a different plugin.
Yeah.
Wait, did I just link to the same thing as an alternative? Okay, I must have copied and pasted the wrong thing. I have no idea which one was the right one.
What do you mean?
So here's one where there's option groups,
Okay.
but you can't interact with them. So if you imagine trying to scroll through 200 options and you see them all the time, that could be a bit overwhelming, even if you have this nice little heading.
Yeah.
But maybe
Do you know if this is better maintained? Because this might be an easier change if they're better maintained.
good point.
There's 34 pull, oh no, only 14 pull requests open here.
It seems a bit better maintained. It says last year versus
Okay.
the date in 2022. I'm not sure if it really is. Maybe it's similar. Latest release was 2020. Has Bootstrap 5 support. We don't have to patch in that.
Yeah. Like if we're looking for an upstream change.
I mean, I
And
like
does the X
this
button work?
UI,
Yeah,
except that I don't know how it will look with 200 choices.
yeah. Well, it'll
It
look
seemed
the
like the kind of
same
thing
with
that might be up your
200.
alley to help evaluate. That's all, but
Yeah,
only if you're interested.
I think it's not going to be a simple fix. I will say that.
I do know.
If
I
only
do know that.
because, okay,
I
just
wouldn't have bothered you if I thought it was
a simple fix. I'm
fixed. Yeah.
saying even for me, somewhat to do with the fact that it involves another community. Like if it were just me, then hiding and showing is not that big a deal. So we might also be able to make a plugin that would manipulate what's there, right? Instead of modifying the core code ourselves. That might be ultimately more sustainable solution. Hmm. So,
Yeah. Well, maybe it is. Let me take a look. Quick peek here. I think maybe I use ChatGPT to do the research for the name of the thing. There's a search plugin now in ChatGPT, which is kind of nice. So you can actually look
Oh.
at recent things.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm not sure if I actually saved that search.
Does it give you non-existent entries?
It helps improve on that.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like I do remember using it for a search, but I don't see it in my search log. So I must have erased the search. I don't keep everything if it's like a quick lookup.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. I can think about that. If it were a quote unquote plugin, it would, unless they've provided some hook into their code, it would be a hacky one that would find elements on the page and then manipulate them, which isn't like the best thing ever, I will say.
The one we're using now is pretty small, to be honest, actually. Like I found the code was pretty well written and easy to modify. The question is like, do we want to maintain a fork? But since it doesn't get updated in the last 2 years, like essentially
maybe, yeah, I mean, it's not changing anyway.
Yes.
It's not like keeping the reference to the old thing is going to really help.
So my guess is it would be easier to change it in some way than to do a plugin.
Yeah.
Given that context of like, we don't really need to refer back to the trunk very often.
Yeah. I meant the other one, but yeah. It would probably be pretty easy in that case to modify the one we have. So it's not as pretty, but we could also make it prettier over time.
I'm not sure which is better as a base. The big thing is it has the collapsible and high and up opt groups, which in my head is a good feature.
Yeah.
The people who use the Weaver are more sophisticated, I guess, than the general public. So I don't know if I would have inflicted on the general public, but you wouldn't normally have them trying to choose between 200 choices either.
Yeah.
I think the two choices for us for this feature are make people look up the code themselves and then copy and paste it in, or have some interface that lets you search. And there's just only so many search interfaces that make sense for that kind of feature.
Yeah, yeah.
But to be clear, like the big task is find a way to let people navigate 200 choices and select multiples of them. It's not to have a great multi-select with collapsible opt groups. That's too specific of an interpretation of it. I just don't know a better way than that right now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's already enormous. Even with the top, just the top level groups.
Yep.
Yeah. Unless we're gonna use Spot.
Well, Spot doesn't perform well enough to do that. I mean, it doesn't have enough clues either. Just the text of the form. It can handle a few of the top level categories, but it doesn't do that well for the deeper ones.
Then there we go. There we go. I mean, the only thing I could think of is to narrow it down a little bit with the biggest categories like we have on court forms online. And then we would have a smaller list. Right? Like it would start and just narrow down the biggest categories. And then it would be a little bit more manageable. But I don't know anything about the categories, so I don't know if that's even possible.
They don't overlap. So the challenge there is we'd basically be saying you can use the Weaver for these kind of topics, and other ones you have to find from another source or add manually. So it wouldn't be enough to say the top 7 categories and say, hey, it's in one of these. You can get more specific if you really need to, but it's going to be in one of these. That won't actually be true. People will have forms that aren't in one of the top 7 categories.
Okay.
I think
I mean, we could have an
2
other.
levels.
We could have an other as well, right? Like
we
that's
could,
always an option.
But we do have that. The problem is you won't get the benefit of using the taxonomy if you don't put in the right code in the right format. So
well, I mean, it would just
hunt a lot of uses to other, then we won't really have the benefit of that question anymore.
Okay.
Because people won't actually categorize things correctly. They'll be more tempted to just write out a text version of the category name, which is totally fair. They can do that.
Well, I mean, we could require a certain pattern so that they can't. But also, I was thinking that it would just offer them the options that did not fall into the other categories, the other main topics.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So show the first ones in one short list that's easier to read, and then
with an
have like a show more button, basically.
Sure.
That shows everything.
Yeah.
Or at least all.
Well, I was thinking of an initial screen that let you pick between the major ones and other, and then drop downs that were specific to the like a next page that would have a drop down that would be specific to, or on the same page, but it would show the appropriate drop down with fewer options. So for example, the family law would have all the family stuff, but then the MISC one would have like, I don't know, like chicken ownership. I have no idea what the other one would contain, but you know, it would have the rest, would have the list of the rest of the like non-major category ones. I'm not sure I'm expressing this clearly. Maybe I'll draw up a wireframe or something.
I think I'm writing down your idea, so I think I get it. But there's obviously a couple ways to do it, but the basic idea is just only show the full set of choices when someone can't find their answer in the main set of choices, but still constrain it so it's an accurate list code.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a drop down for each. You could just have a drop down for each, you know, the main, really main categories. Instead of having them pick an option and go to a next screen. That way they can see right there what's available to them.
That's basically what this is, right? It's just that it's hard to click.
Exactly. It's just that it's hard to click those. So it would just offer those in different drop downs or something.
Maybe it's not so much worse to scroll through this whole list than to have to click the arrow that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And also I'm noticing at some point it expanded everything. And now I can't get the collapsible op group without clicking each one to collapse it.
Hmm. Well, that's not great.
It's just not the best plugin, but
Maybe it's worth using one of the other ones. I mean,
we just
just
don't get the
because it's
collapsible one.
maintained doesn't mean we need to keep up with the maintenance.
Right, because we're talking about like one input, like the things we're going to get from changes may not be worth updating for compared to things that have like more clear security implications. Or
Yeah.
I guess we would want to stay up to date if we're changing to a new version of Bootstrap, and we didn't want to have to redo that work. That's not too frequently.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends what the work is. If it's really easy to pull out, then it may not be that big a deal.
Yeah. The Bootstrap 4 to 5 migration was small enough, right? They just named a couple of the classes. So it wasn't too big of a deal to just add those changes in and then compile it. Even with my limited
Also, if
technology,
our
I can do that
changes are
pretty quickly.
simple enough, we can just rewrite them on top of new code, right?
Right. Well,
I mean, I don't know if they would be. It depends on the library we like use and what it looks like.
thing is weird about my ability to click on things now.
Hmm.
Oh, I think it's because that list doesn't respond very well either. That page is kind of slow, even with just 200 items.
Yeah,
So when I click, there's a lag.
that's interesting. I'd have to see how they implemented stuff, but they might be just doing it in a really inefficient way. But web pages do get slow.
Well, I don't think I've tagged a release with this, but yeah, we probably want to really call that an MVP search interface.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you wanted to talk about? I mean, that's kind of all I can think of.
I mean, there's some interesting topics, but I think better discussed with the whole group. I mean, with like, at least with Bryce here.
Okay.
So probably not that I can recall.
And yeah, just keep in mind, we'll have one such meeting when we're all here for a few weeks. In the next month span, we'll have one meeting where everybody's here.
That's true. That's true.
Because I'll be gone the week of the July 8th. Which is the 10th, actually, is the Monday.
Yeah. 10th is the Monday, got it.
So I'll be back on
Yeah. Well, I thought we could noodle on more like longer term goal stuff, but I honestly don't have any specifics in mind. I was hoping we'd put a list down somewhere of where we were at, but no, I don't know. Going over issues, I think it's one of the best ways for me at least to and we've gone over a lot of issues. We could do more discussion about what the output of a report might look like. I think that's the only thing I can think of, but I think that conversation would better be had with some more, with like Michael and Caroline in the room. Because I think we're going to come up with good questions, but I'm not sure that we'll be able to answer all of them without a bit more input.
Let me just take a look here and see if there's anything that I need to act on that. Yeah, no, I have some time to do that, I think. Let's see. Meeting at 1:30. So,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, let's take a look. Maybe it's helpful to look at the test I was trying to run for the Weaver.
Sure.
That's really
So I'm going to try and get something that I can take some notes.
see if I can. And then maybe to compare it to the test output of something like our Python unit tests to see how they differ.
Sure.
Let's see. This is a
That
pretty
doesn't look
long
right.
debug information. This is not the Weaver. This is the unit test, not the kiln test, just to be clear.
Sure.
So it's doing a lot to install all the dependencies.
Et cetera, et cetera.
It's the test that succeeded. There's some things that are highlighted. I kind of like that with indentation and spacing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have some of that of our own, but we can see that a little bit later.
This is all still installation. So I'm going through, I mean, obviously I got a green check mark. I would expect more information if it failed. But I'm going through. Wow, I guess let's go. Sorry. All right, 24,000 lines. To get to the actual summary here, ran 16 tests. Okay. That's the important information. It is right there at the end. I have to go through 24,000 lines first. That's pretty funny. Makes you really appreciate GitHub for letting us do these unit tests for free on their server resources.
Yes.
Okay. So here's a test that failed. I think obviously we can't avoid these logs. One thing I'm noticing
Bunch of
here,
logs that Bryce one big log that Bryce added at the top of our tests that I think I want to put in the debug instead.
this here,
Mm-hmm.
failed scenarios, and then it shows Yeah, this, I don't really know what to do with this information.
Okay.
Like the screen ID, I don't know how to correlate that with the. So it's saying it tried to fill this in, or it did fill it in on this line,
Mm-hmm.
on this page.
So this, for example, if you saw a line that was missing a variable, if you saw a screen that was missing a variable, you go, well, why didn't it set that variable there? That could be the cause of the problem, right?
Maybe instead of screen ID, it said on page to clarify like what the screen ID was doing here. I don't know how to, I actually didn't take me too long as I say it to understand how the two things is related.
Mhm.
But when I was looking at this error on my phone, which is the first place I was looking at it, I couldn't tell how those things were related, you know, especially when it goes on to an extra line.
Okay.
So a little bit of verbosity might help there, but I don't think I need that here.
What do you mean?
Well, this seems more like debug information, which is maybe what you were saying.
So
Everything that it's set on every page of the interview.
yeah, part of the thing is that a test can pass and still be doing something wrong, right? So for example, if it skipped setting one of the variables on these pages, it could still pass, but it shouldn't have passed because it skipped a couple other pages. But the story table doesn't care that it skips pages, right? That's
Right.
part of the advantage of a story table. So you wouldn't know though if this wasn't here because it would just say passed.
So I'm saying I don't know it now because I test long interviews and this one's not even that long. I guess it's like 40 lines. So I would not read through it to confirm every line was correct. That would to me would be the purpose for me doing the test. But if I did see behavior that was incorrect later, I would look at the debug log to see what went wrong. Does it only create the debug log if the scenario fails?
Nope. It always creates a debug log. But
So
again, we
removing it
were
from,
saying
like,
maybe there could be a summary, right? Which is just pass, fail,
yeah,
and maybe reports would be in the artifacts, right? So the summary would show up in GitHub and the reports would contain more, but they wouldn't be on GitHub, they'd be in the artifacts.
that's true. You don't have to call it a debug log as long as, yeah. I'm just thinking here, I look at it.
There's also the debug log. There would
Yeah.
still be the debug log. It's just harder to read.
That seems fine to me. Like having a detailed report and a debug log is fine. But as someone who uses it only occasionally, I got a little overwhelmed at this point. I think part of it is like the indentation is different. I can understand what it's doing now. I didn't know what the screen ID was meaning there. It should need a little text here to say what it's doing. Like on this screen, I tried to set these variables or something like that. And it would be easier to understand it, but I don't know how relevant this warning is. Is it something that you always need to say? If so, it might be a little too long.
It might be a little too long. Some of our messages are too long. I'm not always sure what to leave out.
So does this actually indicate that the test isn't testing what you think it's doing, or is it really just a best practice to do it? Like once you get your test working, does it matter if this is
what it is saying is that there was a page that was setting interview questions is informational screen, right? But it wasn't doing it on interview questions 1. and there was no interview questions 2 or whatever, like the trigger, there was no interview questions 1. So you might have left out 0 and it was really supposed to be on 0. Basically, the trigger variable didn't match up with anything we could tell. So that means that you're possibly missing a row or have set the wrong trigger variable.
So is this trigger variable maybe better left out?
Not if you actually need the trigger variable. If you're using I, it's a bit small for me, so I'm having trouble. Hang on, let me get rid of chat. Yes, if you're using I, then you need a trigger variable. You just need the right one, you know?
But if this isn't,
So for
there wasn't one
example,
for 0.
so for example, you're missing 0. There is no question, there is no row that is that except for with 0.
Right.
Otherwise it would show it here. It's telling you all the rows that set interview questions I. And there are no rows here for 0. So
But it did get to the end. So what does that mean? Does that mean it wasn't
it
really
means
needed?
it ignored that field. So it didn't give an answer. Most likely.
It was able to continue. Okay, I see this is the informational screen button,
And that's not
Maybe.
required.
which isn't required. So maybe it never actually created the informational screen.
Exactly.
I think it could just be shortened. But is this the appropriate place to show it? So I don't know how to read this log here, really. Because
Yeah,
this
that's a good
this is a
question.
story table, which the fields order doesn't matter. But then here, it seems like this is actually a chronological report.
Yeah.
Where it's saying, I visited this screen, this is what happened.
Yep.
I don't have any context for that when I get to this. So this breaks up the visual
So it
appearance of
says
the row.
on the screen ID, create a draft of screen I. That's what happened.
But okay, this isn't indented as everything else is.
That's true. That's true.
And this is telling me the things that got set. This is saying something didn't get set.
Hang on, not indented or
This seems totally useless to me.
screen. Let me see. That's not useful to you, and that might be more useful in the debug. Hang on, let me write down a couple things.
Okay.
Um,
And to be clear, it's not, there's no way to know for me. Okay, this is 4, no, it's 6 rows to tell me that there's a row missing. No, it's not. Sorry. It's just these. But visually it's like 6 rows, but yeah, it's only 4.
yeah,
So I don't know this field's data was related to this either.
that's
It's not
true.
indented either.
That's true.
Doesn't say what field. But I would just take that out probably.
Well, I would want it on the
On the debug is
one
fine.
of the
There's
logs.
a lot that can go in the debug that probably. So I'm saying maybe this whole report, this screen by screen is a bit more information than is helpful in when you're trying to see if the.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe
would
just like
worry
a
that
summary.
if the warning didn't come with the screen, people, it could come at the end.
I think it could be shortened. Here's one potential way to shorten it. Warning is, I don't know what the trigger variable, I do kind of get it, but as I read this, it's like, this is a very specific thing, which I think makes sense. Like as you were designing this feature, it was one of the things I spent a lot of time thinking about and being able to get it to work right. But is the way that this failure is occurring really different to another kind of unused question?
Yes,
from the developer's point of view.
yes.
In what way?
So, for example, a road that isn't used at all, right, that isn't detected at all, wasn't ever detected. So, for example, that might be because of a typo, or something like that. A road that needs its trigger variable adjusted is a different concept that needs a much clearer explanation about what a trigger variable is, because that's one that people struggle with.
Yeah, I don't think you've explained to me how they're different. You've said that the underlying implementation is different, but not how.
Well, just
From
you
the
have to
developer.
understand about trigger variables for one, and you don't for the other. You need to know that the problem is the trigger variable. If it just says this didn't get set, this has more clues about what is wrong with this specific row. The just a variable didn't get set doesn't tell you the trigger variable is the thing that's wrong.
Correct. That's right. But there are other kinds of patterns of errors too, right? So
Yep.
There could be lots of different field types which have different ways the developer could make mistakes. And so I'm not convinced about the story
Well,
that
the other ones are just typos, generally
they
speaking.
only could be typos. No, they could be logic errors too.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, we can't give any clues about the other ones.
So
There's
I
no
think it's a
other
little
clues we can give.
asymmetric for how much information is given about this particular error, but it doesn't mean that there's not a way to help give people the clues that we can without the big issue for me when I look at this, and I could be wrong, it's my first kind of look through it at this detail. I do know I was really confused by all of this when I first saw it, and I still am not convinced by the screen ID as being represented. We already talked about that one, but if we do have it, like we're leaving that format here, and in a way that I don't know we're getting the right amount of screen real estate and confusion if that trade-off is right. Here's an idea. I'm going to try to just talk through like maybe a way to rewrite it, which is maybe like, if you want to say warning, this field wasn't used, but it looks like a field name. Maybe the trigger variable is missing, and then link to the page, but it's going to create line wrap. I don't know if there's any way to make a shorter URL. There probably isn't really. We have been talking about trying to make a subdomain of suffolklitlab.org for the documentation page at some undetermined time. That might help.
Okay.
That's still too long, what I just said. I think it's shorter than what's there, but it still feels too long. It might make sense to me for it to be on a sub report at the end that says these lines weren't used. And maybe like they're like, hey, we didn't complete these questions that were mentioned. Maybe they weren't, maybe the trigger variable is wrong, something like that. And then like one summary link at the bottom that links to the documentation page that talks about trigger variables might work too. Are the other unused questions listed or not anymore? I felt like they were at one point.
Hang on for one, hang on.
Because here's their two issues with there's two of these here, right? That have the same problem.
Hang on just 1 second, because I'm writing stuff down and I'm not that fast.
Yeah, no problem. I think I'm replying to what you're trying to write down. My idea was like a table at the end which shows the unused variables and one.
Yep, that happens, that happens as well. But you're right that it happens for this particular issue in line, which we could try and list that at the end. Right?
Okay, so this scenario failed. I don't see a summary like that anywhere. Is it going to be at a different part of this?
If it errors, then that loop never gets finished and that doesn't get created. If you look at a passing one, you'll see that it has a rows used and unused rows, or all the rows were used.
Got it.
So I can note down that.
I'm guessing this fields data, like that was something you were using when you were debugging this feature, and it probably just should be removed. Just like more like
Yeah.
test developer information, Kiln developer information than it is
Mm.
test user information.
Yep. Though I will say trigger interview questions 0 question text. You might be able to pull that out. And I'm just going to note that down. Give me 1 second.
I'm guessing what happened here, I don't know for sure. I have to look at the test name. It might have been the test was changed, but the story table was copied over, because I do that. So there might be a lot of unused rows that aren't, because I just haven't sorted through. I don't think I wrote this test, but I'm just wondering if that's the issue.
If what's the issue?
Maybe the test.
Hang on 1 second, just
Sure.
because.
What is this supposed to do?
Okay. So just, do you want to bring up the other thing first? Do you want to address that, or do you want to address this question first?
Let's see. Yeah, I'm distracted by this one. Maybe if it's a long discussion, we can stop it.
Well, I don't know how long it will be, because
The lineup, do you see the line I'm highlighting?
yes. Yep.
Yeah, so I'll actually, yeah, I do want to see if there's a quick answer.
Okay.
I can determine if it's quick or not from our
Okay, because
discussion
I'd rather
starts.
at least note down what you were saying.
I don't know if there was anything else I hadn't said. Maybe you have a
Because
question.
I said, wait a second, and you were in the middle of saying something.
I don't remember if it was anything that needed to be written down.
Okay, so that section is up there, is a progress bar for the test that you don't actually get to see because GitHub doesn't show it. But the dots are for each individual step. But a table does a lot of things that only count as one step. So one, there's a disproportionate number of things that happen and that you've put in the test that wouldn't show up there. Second, it tells you what happens. So, and we're planning to add a section in the documentation about this. A asterisk means a field was set. A right arrow means that a named variable button was pressed. And a down arrow button, no, that means, this is why I have to document this stuff. That might mean that it continued automatically, and that the V's mean that a named variable was pressed to continue. So it says which places continued, right? The arrows are about when the interview continued. But usually people don't look at that, so.
Yeah, I just kind of skipped over it to see the testing report. So maybe that's fine. Maybe a little bit more separation here to say this is the start of the report. Because it's not that progress. And I guess if that's something you're doing when you use that when you're running local tests, is that the idea?
Yes, and I believe that if one gets familiar with this system, it's a useful indication of what has happened. But that's for people that are more familiar with it, you know. But it doesn't actually interfere with anybody doing anything else.
It's only one line of noise, so that's probably fine. One thing I'm noticing here is this warning is highlighted. I wonder if it has to do with case.
It doesn't have to do with case. It has to do with special coloring syntax for the console. Part of the problem with that is that special coloring will show up badly in the playground because it'll show up as the literal characters. It won't show up as the colors. And
Hmm.
so we would have to do a bunch of find and replace for coloring in different ways.
Okay.
But that might, if you end up making a highlighter for this, it might help you parse it because the colors would be spelled out there. I mean, it would be an easier way to delineate different, to find and replace, basically. Progress bar.
Okay. So, yeah, I would say like a summary maybe here that says we ran it 2 warnings and 2 errors. And then this space doesn't make sense to me here between those 2 lines. These are both errors, right? They're 2 different errors, or is it restating the error in a different way? Or is it providing information about the first error? I'm actually not sure.
It is.
How are these 2 lines
restating the
related?
errors, I think.
1 error, is that right?
I think these could be just 1 error unless, of course, one is a fallback in case there isn't one is like the default error. I think we have a default error that appears no matter what, and then possibly errors with more details that come before it. Errors, too much space.
We don't know why this error is here. Let's see. Maybe this is a real error that needs to be resolved. It's good to test this. I was getting a lot of errors that were timeouts. I'm not sure if I double checked this. Let's see.
If it's a timeout, it says this took too long.
Correct.
If it's a timeout that was long because of a reload, it also says that specifically.
Oh, I know what it was. I was thinking this might be due to the change in DocAssemble's variable name resolution thing. I'm not sure if that's true, but the timing lined up for me.
It doesn't look like that to me. Hang on. Question text, interview question text, one. Question text, informational screen.
Let me see if I look at it here.
Sure, yeah.
There was an error on screen. Let's see what it was. Oh, there's 2 screenshots. So that might have been 2 errors. I would say if there, either way, there needs to be a better grouping of the errors. If there are 2 errors, it should be under a section that says errors. Or something like that. Okay, so none of the fields were selected on this screen. Maybe it was intended to be an informational screen, but that button wasn't clickable.
Yep.
I don't know. It's interesting because I don't know. I don't think that the feature file changed. And that question in the interview didn't change in that PR. This is the same error. Okay. So it's worth. I don't know why that's happened.
Well, I can tell you my guess as to why that error happened. So you have no interview questions 0 question text when you set the informational screen. You had a test that said, I want to set this as an informational screen, so I'm not selecting other boxes on this page. But you don't have the right variables to set that, so that never gets set. So you try to continue and the page says,
The reason why I'm
you
saying I
haven't
don't
answered.
know why it has that issue is because I'm saying that the feature file, I don't think changed. But maybe I'm wrong. I guess I did have to update something for a feature.
Look
Let me
at the
just see what
diff.
the change is. Yeah, I added a test. None of those lines changed.
Mhm.
And that test that I added seems to have passed.
Okay.
So
So
I
yeah,
know what
maybe it's something in DocAssemble.
yeah, I guess we should see what happens when Jonathan releases his next version of DocAssemble. He says he's releasing one today. That
Okay.
changes something about how variables are triggered.
Yeah, now that warning, I will say that warning probably doesn't matter for you if you wanted the second screen to be informational, but not the first screen to be informational. And I don't know how to avoid that because there's no way for us to know.
Which is the first, which is the second?
Yeah, well, if you're accidentally not setting the first. Hang on just a sec, let me write a note down about that. Oh, shit. Sorry, my French. I forgot my other note that I was saying to myself. Dang it. But in the meantime, yes, okay. Yeah, the thing is that it's impossible to determine that's why it's a warning, not an error, right? It's impossible to determine if the person intentionally is setting something different on a different page, or if the person has made a mistake with their trigger variable. But warnings could go
Yeah.
at the end.
That makes sense. So the question is just like,
So there you've got unused rows. You can see.
yep, I see that. Yeah, that's what I was thinking I was going to see, but I see why that didn't happen if the test didn't ever finish. Are there other kinds of unused variables? No, you only know about it when there's a trigger variable that partially matches, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't know if it was intended to be on that screen or not.
Yeah.
So that's the only one you can give a warning for in line like that.
What was my other note? I'm gonna have to go through. I might have to finish at 12:30 today.
Yeah, no problem.
This has been a lot of really good information though, and really good thoughts.
I actually really like the way this is expanded, although let me just check on mobile to see. It's kind of messy on mobile,
It's
but it's
super messy
easy
on
enough to
mobile.
see the line number, I guess.
It is, but it is super messy on mobile. And it also, if you have a big paragraph of text as the value,
It's even messier.
it's even messier.
Yeah.
Though it doesn't save you much if it's shorter. And we could get a table formatter. but a big paragraph of text is one of our concerns.
Yeah, that's fair. Which will be a valid test to have. Check for like addenda and stuff, obviously.
And also if people decide to copy this into their file, right? If people say, oh, I like the rows that got set, I don't want those unused rows there. They can just copy that right there into their file. And I get to the question ID, blah, blah, with this data. They can copy that whole thing and it won't be incredibly long for won't be as wide in their file.
I see.
So this, for example,
something you
might
think
wrap
people are
for
gonna do?
people whose editors are wrapping.
Trying to think about, I would think through that user story a little. I don't know
Sure.
what that
sure.
is going to be, but you would know better. I mean, work with more people doing these tests. Just thinking through this here, like this is
I don't know
interesting.
yet. I will say I
Yeah.
don't know yet. That we're getting rid of
Okay,
in version 5. That's
great.
been a plan for
I mean,
a
I kind of
while.
like there's a highlighted thing, but it would
Yeah,
be
it's
nice
nice
that we're
that
part
it's
of Kiln
separated.
instead of something else.
Exactly.
So if you did want to repeat it for this part here, that might be nice.
That square, that part is not ours. That's Cucumbers.
I see that. It says share a cucumber report.
No, I know, but the part above it is Cucumbers. All the part below the reports is Cucumbers. So this error up here, this is Cucumbers. That's
The assertion error
Cucumbers.
on line 678.
Yep, this whole section where they have X's and check marks next to stuff. If you scroll up, you can see that.
What? This all the way up here?
This, keep going. If you keep going. So that's the end of the report. This is Cucumber.
The failures. So you get to say, you obviously are customizing part of this because there's a step here.
Maybe at bottom, but that's the test that the author wrote, right? That's
Yeah,
what it's
so you
showing
just
down there. It's
repeat the
showing
whole
the whole
test, basically.
test. It's showing the whole test. Now what we could do is add a line at the bottom that says cucumber report or something.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So it's 12:32. Do you want to, should we stop here?
Yes, we should. Okay.
All right. The other thing is I always see this one just before, and this doesn't seem to actually be right. Right. This is not actually the test failure.
Yes, we're also getting rid of that. And that is something
Okay.
that someone added in along the way in the wrong order in the action.yaml, our action.yaml.
Okay. So it's
And
reported.
I think there's an issue for it.
Got it.
It's something that was easy, so I was kind of leaving it as low-hanging fruit for someone. But at some point you got to take care of the low-hanging fruit too. So
Yeah.
you know, what can you do?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm happy to
Okay,
share.
that's a lot
gonna
of
try to use it
awesome
more,
feedback.
so
I
hopefully
really like it. Huh?
Yeah, I'm happy to try going through it to finish the stuff we didn't get to sometime.
Yeah, that
Couple
would be
weeks.
great.
All right. So, it's an awesome tool. I hope to keep being able to use it more.
Thank you. We'll
Yeah.
cross my fingers, you know.
All right.
All right.